How we see ourselves matters. Identity affects not only how we act on our own, but how we interact with others, how we show up in the world. Identities in today's society are complex. They're fluid. They exist in relationship to systems such as law and education, healthcare, the economy. Identity is an integration of experiences, relationships, values, and the formation of memories that create our sense of self. Behavior, actions, language differences, physical features, and culture all make us who we are, and the social group we're part of also have a large impact. The field of psychology, particularly the work of Erik Erikson, gave us greater understanding of how people form their identities in the context of social settings. What Erikson did not take into account, though, was how power and diversity are directly connected to how we think about identities. An individual's social identity indicates who they are in terms of the groups to which they belong. And there are a lot of dimensions we can consider here: national origin, language, race, ethnicity, ability, gender, age, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. And within each of those dimensions, there are majority and minority populations. Some groups hold more power and privilege. They have something of value simply because of the groups they belong to, rather than anything they've done or failed to do. Others experience limitations in their choices, opportunities, and ability to influence, and ultimately unjust treatment and subjugation enacted by dominant groups. That's what oppression is. Power structures inevitably come into play when a culture places more value in a dominant group that holds the authority within a society. You may have heard the term intersectionality passed around. Let's talk about that, because intersectionality is a unique and crucial way to think through diversity as it exists in the workplace. Kimberly Crenshaw, a law professor at UCLA, in 1989 wrote on the intersection of race and gender, specifically in regards to the experiences of Black women in the United States and the unique power dynamics at play for them. Since Black women are marginalized on two different planes, race and gender, their experiences of discrimination were largely uncharted in law. Crenshaw advocated for the law to address not just half of their identity, either their gender identity or their racial identity, but their whole selves, both gender and racial identities. If we were to only address their femaleness or their Blackness, we would miss the way that Black women specifically are oppressed in a binary, power-based system. Now, with some background on intersectionality in mind, what does that tell us about how identity influences our own experience and the experience of our colleagues? We're not made of one characteristic over here and another disconnected one over there. The different facets of our identities interact with each other. It's like a mosaic. In any mosaic, pieces of various shapes and sizes and colors come together to produce a unique design. Likewise, in the workplace environment, all of our human factors, age, class, culture, ability, ethnicity, gender identity and expression, immigration status, nationality, race, religion, sexual orientation, political ideology, all of these form the larger, complex picture of who we are and who the people we serve and work with are. Undoubtedly, social identities greatly affect how we interact in the workplace. More importantly, they provide us an opportunity to think about and acknowledge our identities as assets that we bring into the workplace environment. So here I want to share a model and a tool called the Mosaic of Diversity with you. It's an excellent tool for self-reflection and for building empathy and understanding of people who are situated differently from ourselves. The Mosaic of Diversity visually represents the multiple dimensions of an individual's identity. The mosaic is made of two concentric circles divided into dimensions of our identity. The inner circle includes generally inherent or less changeable characteristics. The outer circle contains more extrinsic or social characteristics. There's not a bold line between inherent and extrinsic characteristics, but it can be useful to think about what makes us up at our core and what circumstances or choices we carry. The Mosaic of Diversity is completely flexible. It is a simple graphic used to create a structure and numerous access points for talking about dimensions of identity. The inner and outer dimensions are not firmly fixed. You can move them around, you can change the labels, you can use different words, and even add categories that are important to you but are not represented in the version shown here. So please make it your own. Here are a couple of simple ways that Mosaic of Diversity has been useful for me personally. I personally have used it to help me more deeply understand the difference between aspects of my own identity, like race and ethnicity. Race is about phenotype, right? The physical characteristics associated with a person or a group of people. Race is broadly known and understood to not be a scientific differentiator, but a social one. Racially, I identify as biracial. My parents are both born in the United States. My mother is white and my father is black. Ethnically, however, I identify as black, but again in the US context. So when talking with others who are black and raised in the US, we often find ourselves having very similar experiences, down to the nuances, like having a big mama, or the right way to make spaghetti, or typical behavior during things that all families go through, like births or deaths or funerals. Having language, race, and ethnicity helped me better understand myself and even communicate with more clarity about issues of race, ethnicity, and cultural identity when talking with others. Another example of how the Mosaic has been useful to me is when working with colleagues, particularly new people. Having the Mosaic's simple framework in mind has allowed me to pause before making assumptions about them based on visible characteristics alone. Let me explain. Each of us, if we were to fill in our own personal mosaic, then share it with another person, we would likely accentuate certain aspects of our own identities more than others. For me, the fact that I am a mother would be front and center. Another would be the fact that I was raised in a religion that's marginalized societally. Both of those had and do have significant impact on how I experience the world every single day. But a person who doesn't know me wouldn't be able to detect either by looking at me alone. Someone just meeting me might instead assume that identities visible to them, like my skin color or gender, tell the full story, then proceed to say or do something that may be perceived as offensive or exclusive, like making a joke about Jehovah's Witnesses or a cutting remark about another member of the team who leaves the office at the same time every day to pick up their child from school. The Mosaic of Diversity is a wonderful, low-risk way to begin exploring aspects of your identity and invite others into a dialogue. I've used it hundreds of times with teenagers, with college students, and with working adults at every level of their careers. The feedback has been consistently positive. To help you facilitate a meaningful and inviting cross-cultural exchange, we have included a handout and exercise that includes step-by-step instructions and facilitation tips.